It's the 27th. December, just a couple of days left for 2022. We're doing a recap of 2022. It's taken the entire year shows and condensing it into 10 or 12 shows. I was hoping to do less, but it's hard to appreciate how much we cover each year. It's around 55,000 screen captures and about another 60, 70,000 supporting documentation. It's 120, 125,000 basically. So people who read a couple of articles a week can't touch the people that participate in these broadcasts. I hope everybody's doing quite well on this Monday. Is it Monday? I lost track a while ago. Tuesday. Monday. Tuesday. I'll get there. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. We have a rather important poll tonight. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Now, I personally think that's a wonderful idea. Don't expect a journalist to come out and acknowledge it. Growing food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. That's actually so evil, so crazy. Now you notice we're on a new time schedule, and there is no schedule where this is a different kind of program where we're taking a year's worth of news and condensing it down into a dozen shows or less. So the poll tonight is, should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, my apologies, surrounded by farms, and that's the majority of nuclear power plants, be closed to preserve human life? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. Irreversible heart damage. Irreversible. Look the word up in the encyclopedia if you're not familiar with it. Irreversible. Permanent heart damage for children with as little as 50 becquerels a kilogram. So there's a few people who wants me to figure out for them what was pre-nuclear industry background radiation, and then how did it progress all the way up till now through all the major events. That information is correct. It's not available anywhere on the entire planet. That's not an accident. Pre-Fukushima, your Geiger gamma counters, which is that Geiger counter, for instance, was maybe 30 becquerels a minute. This is 20 million a second. You're seeing right there after Fukushima. But there was 220 million atoms. My Geiger counter is not going to pick this up, by the way. 220 million atoms. These are catastrophic numbers. They never go away. My apologies, I forgot to drink water before I went live. Now I feel normal, almost. So these are catastrophic numbers. You basically, you got to extrapolate from a number like that. And this is catastrophic. This is absurd numbers. And again, my Geiger counter is not going to show you iodine 129 with a 15 million year half-life. So this is absurd numbers. Okay, So we're basically covering just the headlines. We're still doing January. And we're just going to dive into it. This is a recap of 2022. There's probably going to be 10 videos in this series. This is part 2. You don't need to see part 1 to understand any of these parts. Railcar completes Department of Energy used fuel transport system. That's radioactive now. And they'll sell that to some company when they're finished with it. A radioactive train car. BN 800 running on 60% mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada, illegal in the United States because it's so evil. Just producing it is absurdly evil. And you can see how the nuclear industry doesn't care about life whatsoever because they can't change the emissions. And so the pole tonight, almost every nuclear power plant you look at is surrounded by farms. All nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging. What's worse, a nuclear bomb or a nuclear power plant? Well, a nuclear power plant is thousands and thousands and thousands of times worse than a nuclear bomb because the fuel pools are still splitting the atoms with no containment. This is why they have them surrounded by farms, so they can poison you and everybody else worldwide through the farms. It's unbelievable evil is what we're talking about. North Korea's saber-rattling rekindles nuclear test site. So North Korea, they burnt down every community. United Nations did in the 50s. And since then, they've had land, sea, and air embargoes. And no matter what North Korea does, they're not going to remove the embargoes. And 50 years before that, Japan had controlled them for the previous 50 years. So for the last 120 years of North Korea's life, they have been slaves and oppressed. And violently, I might add. How would you feel if America, you're in America, or you're in Canada, and you have land, sea, and air embargoes against your country for 70 years? How would you perceive the rest of the world? That's collective punishment, see? Nuclear fusion is nowhere near ready for prime time. This was 2022 in January. And now they're claiming they got a major breakthrough, but there was none. It was for weapons. And their stocks shot up, and they cashed in, and everybody lost their investments a week later. An EU dispute over sustainable energy, which would be geothermal. How come Germany didn't go geothermal? Because that's the nuclear industry had a hand in it, see? North Korea threat to test the ICBM. Of course you do. What would you do if you were surrounded for 70 years? What do you think they're going to do? You really think they're not going to do it? What do you think the media is vilifying them when they're actually no threat to nobody, only somebody that invades them? South Korea, piece of shit, South Korea, plan to jointly bid for nuclear energy projects overseas. This was January, remember? It was only in the summer when they went full steam ahead on nuclear rebuild right out of the blue with a new administration. You have to wonder what's really going on in the background. And we know that he got elected in South Korea because he was pro-nuclear. So the industry is controlling your politics and denying you a future. Wow, that's two big glunks. Finland is going to advise Lithuania on a hole in the ground because they're too stupid to come up with a real solution. 2022 focus is on completing nuclear power projects. This India? I think so. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I think this was India's story, but this is 12 months almost ago, 11 months ago. Yeah, that's India. But India's nuclear industry is only 5% of the country's energy. It's strictly about weapons. Trust me, it's strictly about the weapons. Investor clash on gas and nuclear muddies the EU green finance drive. See, there's not a clash. There's no way to quantify the European Union as classifying nuclear and gas, nuclear in particular, as a green energy in their taxonomy. They can't quantify that assertion at all. And so half of the EU Parliament, which was over 500 speakers, voted that it was green, and slightly less than 500 voted that it wasn't. And so what you see is bought and paid for politicians swung the vote, not common sense, not science, not despicable academics. Frightening map shows how much of Ireland would be blown up if a nuclear bomb. The only reason you would bomb Ireland is because they're hanging on to the old and decrepit UK nuclear subs, and that's why they put them there, so Ireland would get blown up. U.S. appreciates Kuwait, which, by the way, it's illegal to have power plants in Ireland, but they got nuclear subs there. U.S. appreciates Kuwait's support for mutual return to compliance. U.S. appreciates Kuwait. Really? Because you own Kuwait, right? You killed 300,000 of the Ba'ath Party in 1999 with depleted uranium. You had to bury all the vehicles and the carcasses on site because you shot it up with depleted uranium on the highway of death. I don't know if I can pronounce his name. Medvedev. This is Russian name. Sees no need to review Russia's nuclear doctrine. Well, Russia's just fly by wire. It doesn't have an actual. Any kind of so-called doctrines it has, it'll break them on the drop of a hat. It's a fly by wire. It's a pointless country, and the country of very, very, very rude people. Nuclear Commission fines Oyster Creek owner $50,000. $50,000. If you have a nuclear leak, though, an event, a waste, a release into the environment, first off, they're not going to use the sirens, and second off, they're not going to get a fine. Over security, like somebody's actually going to sneak in there and steal something. Nuclear disablement team trains for sampling emissions. They didn't sample after Fukushima, did they? It's a total betrayal. Locals and leaders eye transition to nuclear power boomtown. Don't ask me where that's to. Population 2,600. Preparing for the construction of a next-generation nuclear power plant. A natrium reactor demonstration plant. They're preparing to be used as guinea pigs, but it actually won't happen because the rules are so strict, they got to contain the radiation. So therefore, they can't build it. And you should hear them out there screeching and whining and sniveling that the laws don't allow them to poison the population of all the species on the planet. North Korea to cheer the UN disarmament forum on nuclear weapons. United States, EU should walk out. Why should they walk out, though? You finally get them at a table, now you're going to walk out. You should walk out and never come back, you pieces of excrement. Remember what they done to North Korea, folks. Never forget why North Korea is like it is. Conference on Disarmament to hold the first public plenary of its 2022 session on Tuesday. Why is United Nations calling the shots for every country worldwide? When is the world going to speak for themselves? Why are you letting a despicable organization known as the New World Order and the military-industrial complex, aka United Nations, tell you how to think and eat and walk and talk and everything else? Why are you sitting in silence? Because they got you hoodwinked. The average person has no concept unless you're hanging around here. NRC finds the owners of former New Jersey nuke tart plant for second security lapse. That's a repeat. We just covered it. U.S. and Iran in a ballpark of possible nuclear deals. My goodness, for years and years, that headline is constant every week, right? The last thing you want to do is acquiesce to the American military-industrial complex, or I should say United Nations, and which also encompasses NATO, even though they claim it doesn't. It certainly does. Attorneys working on trial date for nuclear bailout bribery case, but there should be a bribery case for every nuclear plant, particularly Diablo Canyon. How do you think Diablo Canyon just got all that money? Nuclear waste management market to expand. Again, this is not true. The industry is, in 2021, at a 291.5 gigawatts of energy that came online, only 0.5%, half of a percent of one, was nuclear. The other 291 gigawatts was renewables. So it's a complete dishonest to suggest that there's going to be a 16% surge. Russia revises expectations on clinching Iran nuclear deal. So there's a whole lot of countries doing all they can to stop Iran from being bullied. Stopping Iran from being a sovereign country. So why have you got all these countries, and these are all military genocide machines, tangling up Iran in propaganda like that? Taipei allegedly from areas affected by Japanese nuclear disaster. Sashimi, I'm not sure. I think that's about food. Hang on. To uphold a ban and address the dubious Japanese imports of radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland. Failing to enforce a ban on Japanese food amid food safety concerns. She was shocked to find that sashimi made from fish labeled as being from Chiba was provided at a Japanese restaurant she visited last week and had been on the market in Taiwan. This was supposed to be banned, radioactive food. South Korea shipped back 6 million pounds of seafood. It was too radioactive to eat. How much do you think actually got through? A milestone towards nuclear fusion. So nuclear fusion for the last couple of years have been hoodwinking the entire planet and stopping it from coming up with real solutions by keeping this vapor fable alive. The White House, or the WV House, whatever the hell that is, to fast-track Senate-approved bill lifting state restrictions on nuclear... Oh, that's... West Virginia. Lifting... Fast-tracking a state-approved bill lifting of restrictions on nuclear power plants. But there's 25 states with no restrictions, but you don't see anybody building power plants. But the place where there's a restriction, this is just how the industry works. It can't handle that there's actually a place where they're not allowed to build plants. They're not going to build nothing there because renewables is the moral and ethical thing. And we're talking about nuclear, so I guess that doesn't matter. Delayed Vogue expansion on track for 2022 start. It's 12 years behind schedule. Kishida and Biden, with a shake of a hand or touch of a It looks so stupid, don't it? It's a scamdemic. And 2 of these, with a shake of a hand, removed all restrictions in September on food from the nuclear wasteland in Japan. Britain to give EDF Sizewell $135 million support for nuclear project. First off, $135 million is all administration. There's nothing going to go in infrastructure of that tiny amount of money. You're talking about they need 32 to 36 billion. Why is it surrounded by farms? Because that's the new one they're going to build and are starting to. Why is it surrounded by farms? Which coincidentally, we got a poll tonight saying, should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Well, certainly they should be closed. These things are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. And because my video only goes out to a few people, I got 9 viewers. 9 viewers. Hard cases. There's not much I can do about it. We got to come out and try to have a conversation, right? We're losing a billion birds a year. Billion birds a year. Bald eagles shatters front windows. Well, there's not a billion birds flying in the windows each year. That's the cover story for the die-off from radiation. Most of them died of starvation. And it's actually a lot more than that. UK invest again, 135 million. Wind turbine prices set to rise, but they still dominated it. That's done by the industry to try to slow the industry down. Russia's record-breaking nuclear submarine be armed with super weapons to attack the West. You got to have, and then the West, Russia will put out the same kind of headlines about the Americans, right? So they need an enemy to justify robbing the country and destroying the country from the inside, right? And this is one of the reasons North Korea exists, so you always got a boogeyman at your fingertips, right? Like, why build something you can't actually use? Why spend that kind of money, energy, time, effort? And think about how much pollution and harm these things cause just from normal use. It's astronomical, really. This is Bikini Atolls. The saltwater explosions had a phenomenon of the sulfur from the salt would create a spherical shape, and it would basically uptake uranium, plutonium, and everything else, and turn it into super hot particles that were highly mobile. And just a single one in an animal or a bird or insects or humans would cause a cascade health effect that would ultimately lead to their demise. So we're going to poll tonight, why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, and in this case, communities also? Should disease factories known as nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Now, the reason that I framed the narrative that way, it's like anybody with common sense knows the right answer, but it's the question that never gets asked. And it's a way for people it's a way to reinforce for people of the harm that you really should be concerned about. You have to be worried about the food you're buying, because the industry is growing food and on purpose to poison you. Radiation in small doses actually can be disproportionately worse. And radiation doses spread out over time might be more dangerous than doses given at once. So the bioaccumulation of eating food from around these disease factories is 100-fold harm for children and animals, mammals, and insects and birds and this stuff, some of it lands and gets assimilated, where it's pulsing energy every second. And so everything in the tree is saturated at this stage from anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. And all the branches are pulsing this invisible energy at almost 186,000 miles per second. And so when they hit each other, gammas, alphas, neutron, betas, the emissions, they hit each other and they're pulsing every second. They'll change direction. So it's a braking effect. That creates another horrific effect known as full body X-rays. So the full body of the birds, the insects, the mammals, the animals, plants, food, humans, children is ongoing because we have so much into the environment. You're creating not just gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, but X-rays that have a full body catastrophic effect upon all your chromosomes and DNA, and your cells are being wrecked every single second. Your body has to repair all this. So your body is flooding itself with white blood cells, so you'll feel more lethargic. You don't have any energy. You can't think clearly. So this is why we have a poll for everybody. Should disgusting, despicable, scum nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve the human life? Be closed to preserve the human life? And the answer is obviously just one answer is yes. Malaysia nuclear medicine market, nuclear medicine, and I strongly object to calling anything nuclear medicine. I reject it, and you should too. There is no, you're putting radiation in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. That displaces your red blood cells that carries oxygen and nutrition. Your excrements are radioactive and need to go on to a repository. So how can that possibly... And we like to say here, radiation treatments are like terracotta soldiers, no two are alike. It's just an evil, hateful, despicable death cult. There's no redeeming qualities to the nuclear industry, period. Researchers achieved milestone on path towards nuclear fusion. Again, that's only meant to get people to invest in a dead-end, deadpan industry, and which is the actual military-industrial complex itself. Major construction milestone for Hinkley Point C, which wasn't true at all. It was a complete fable. They still don't have the money. Yeah, they have the money to get started. And look at this carbon-free nuclear disease factory, surrounded by farms, I might add. When they call that carbon-free, does anybody have any concept of what they're actually talking about? These are the most resource-intensive things in human history. That, in particular, is the biggest man-made project in human history. And it's surrounded by farms. It's surrounded by farms. And the nuclear plants are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Why are people sitting in silence? Well, Facebook and Microsoft, big moves, tell us about metaverse. Yeah, Facebook actually changed its name to reflect living in a virtual reality. $68 billion for a video game. Call of Duty, which is a military game. Activision Blizzard is nuclear. No, there's no indoctrination there whatsoever. This is what they are designing for you for your future. This is what they're trying to lock you up in your homes right now, so that'll be the only option that you have. They're completely insane. And this is not Facebook doing this. This is the military-industrial complex, United Nations, that's orchestrating it. Who is Annie Frank and why her legacy still fought over today? I don't fight over. I couldn't care less about her. Electricity production of Finland's long-delayed OL3 reactor pushed back again and again over 12 years. Oh, excuse me. Huh. And this is the plant they're talking about. Brand new plant surrounded by farms. Which reminds me, we're going to poll tonight. Should disgusting, despicable nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve the human life? And yes, every one of them should be closed immediately. It's horrific. It's an absurd betrayal. Brookhaven lab physicist named a AAS fellow. Brookhaven Labs, which is in New Jersey, they've contaminated all the aquifers underneath these places. This is a huge facility, by the way. They have massive cancer on from the employees and the entire surrounding area. They're like the worst neighbors you could ever have. If it's within 100 miles of you, that's your neighbor. It's nothing but one great big disease factories. Oh, speaking of disease factories, Chalk River National Laboratory. Working with rare medical isotopes. Like, under no circumstances should you believe nuclear can cure cancer. It's under no circumstances. Chalk River was the site of the world's first nuclear meltdown. It's in Canada. It's currently, they didn't decommission it, they poured cement over it, aka grout, and walked away. So every time it rains, it washes all that radiation down into the river, hence Chalk River, which runs into the biggest aquifers in the northern hemisphere. You think that's an accident? Sizewell C funding a huge stride towards low carbon. I think everybody that says nuclear is low carbon should lose their tongue. They should cut it right out of their mouth. Time to take India and France ties to the next level. Why though? There's 1 million children die every year in India from starvation, for Christ's sakes. UN watch. UN watch. UN is 195 militaries. That's why Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex, and George W. Bush Sr. called them the New World Order. The Sundance Film Review, Speak No Evil. Speak No Evil, which is nuclear. The Russia crisis and what's next. This is February the 1st of 2022, just before the invasion, so to speak. Just before the staged invasion. Light therapy fast tracks healings of cell damage from cancer radiation therapy. The radiation kills all the cells in your body almost. That's why you lose all your hair, for instance. And it destroys your ability to have a future. There is no, like, it's the worst thing you can do. And they've been at this for 100 years. Since they discovered radiation, they've been using it to try to cure everything. They used to have radon suppositories, radon toothpaste, radon lipstick. All the women's faces were falling off and they were dying of horrific cancers. Radon water, where they had pure radon in a bottle and you pour water in there and then you would drink the water and your jaws would fall off. Everything in the nuclear industry should be taken by a helicopter and dropped inside of Reactor 3 in Medusa at Fukushima. They're disgusting. There's no maybes about it either. Icebreakers, some of the toughest ships in the world. Yeah, and when the nuclear icebreakers like the Leningrad, they threw the reactor in the Arctic Sea. You can't trust anything in the nuclear industry. There's not a single person in the entire nuclear industry that people can relate to. You can't trust the industry. The industry has been taken over by inbreeding, and the result of all that inbreeding is demonic, sadistic, cowardly demons. Polish nuclear reactor has been put into operation in an emergency. It replaces the Dutch in the production of an important element used to murder victims in hospitals. Securing nuclear waste, how to warn the future generation of the danger. This is a question we get every couple of months, shows up in the media. How are we going to warn people 400,000 years down the road? You're not. The planet will be still radioactive from all the meltdowns and dumping and everything else. European experts evaluate about decommissioning of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, which is an unbelievable lie to suggest they evaluated it. That's the remains of reactor 4. They're claiming there's on the inside,
Now,
this disgusting maggot, Arnie Gunnarsson. Let's play that for a second. Oh, lizard lips.
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And so he thinks it looks like that over there when it actually looks like this. He doesn't think it. His job is to convince you it does. And if that doesn't frighten the shit out of you, hang around. There's lots worse coming up. It's disgusting that the media and universities are doing this. This wreckage, this stump that's there, they built this structure off-site, laid it there with cranes. The panels were laid there by gravity. That's just a panel. There is no building. But they want you to believe you got the fuel out of the pool when the building doesn't even exist. And for them to get away with that meant they had to get cooperation from all medias and all universities worldwide. There was no dissenting voices from any discipline. The tanks were built to trick you, manipulate you into thinking they haven't polluted the entire planet and the oceans. They had 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2022, they got 8,000 tanks. The water they claim that they're using each day is equal to a garden hose, split 4 ways, 150 tons. The industry is insane. These people that work for it and come out and promote the lies, they meet the definition of insane. And murderers and scum. And they done the same thing with Reactor 3. They faked the shit out of that and pretended that the fuel pool was at the top of the building, and the building doesn't even exist. The fuel pools would be at the top. So you can see the 2 depictions. And the fuel pools are stuffed with decades because they don't have a repository anywhere. Why is this so hard for me to do today? Yeah, I was a little surprised yesterday we didn't make it through January. Maybe that's because I'm trying to do an explanation for the headlines and rather than go through the whole story, hoping that would be a solution, but it's not. That's the stump of Reactor 3, which was a mixed oxide fuel. But they want you to believe that they got everything out, and it looks like that. And they got the fuel pool, and they absolutely unequivocally did, and it's 100% the lie. They're really good at lying. They're professional. Well, they're not even good at lying. They're good at murdering all the species, and this is what they got done. No timeline on ending the food ban. A few months later, they ended the food ban. Europe experts, and first off, there's 0 possibilities they evaluated it. Nanaimo, British Columbia Art Gallery hosting traveling exhibition Bombshell bomb head inspired by the atomic age. Inspired. It should be horror of the atomic age. The most toxic substance on the face of the earth. If it adds, nuclear power is emerging as an answer to fill the gap as we move from carbon fuels. It sounds like more nuclear industry hokum. One of the front ends of the complex's process of mining, milling, enriching uranium. Tremendous amounts of fossil fuel are being burnt. It's the most toxic substance on Earth, period, and there's no safe way to dispose of it, and it's splitting atoms constantly into the environment as a perpetual disease factory. Legislators approve a 2.25 trillion central government budget, and I'm not sure what country that is. Yeah, Taiwan, which is 80 billion US. Again, Taiwan moved all the natives over to Orchard Island a long time ago. And they asked the natives on Orchard Island that were segregated and moved away from the population if they could build a canning factory for tuna and salmon and stuff like that. And the natives said, yeah, sure, that's a great idea. And they were all going to get a stipend, some money each month from the profits. And so Taiwan wasn't going to build a canning factory. They wanted to build a nuclear dump. But they told the natives it was a canning factory and built a nuclear dump there, which, by the way, is now allegedly removed. They had to fight for something like 26 years. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Imagine how evil you actually got to be to do something like that. Well, it's normal. If you're talking about nuclear, this is normal. That's how they roll. They're evil. They don't do anything without some kind of evil context behind it. Exotic Japanese fruits now available at Don Don Donkey for a limited time only. This is from the nuclear wasteland itself. And this is one of the reasons we got a poll tonight. I'm having a hard time getting my poll to come down. I gotta play with my mouse. I got no idea. Yeah, I got her. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve life? Yeah, of course so. Wow, we got 13 people on my show? I'm shocked. That's not censorship at all. Since we've been doing it for a decade, you'd think I have at least 14 people on my show. Uh-oh, no water left here. It's okay. Gotta back up. A cup of tea. I'll get up and get some water during intermission. How to become a good ancestor? Well, you try to kill everything in the nuclear industry? I don't know. I give up. And scientists research at Chernobyl faces trouble if Russia invades Ukraine, which of course is what happened. This is January 28th. A bit of a mix-up when I pulled them all together. North Korea confirms 2 tactical guided missiles tests. So what? All the media, right, has to keep demonizing North Korea so the victims that reads the stories get properly indoctrinated so that the industry can be evil and the people are happy. Japan to help with Bill Gates' next generation nuclear power project. Japan. Which of course is not true, right? But they had to come out and get some street cred by sticking their name on it. Bill Gates was happy to oblige. Anything for nuclear. There's nothing they won't do for nuclear. You want us to kill everybody on the planet with radioactive fallout? Well, we'll do it. Taiwan faces egg shortages and price rising ahead of Spring Festival. Poor Taiwan. They screwed that so bad. I don't remember. Australia just exported its first batch of fuel that doesn't emit CO2. Well, that's an absurd statement, see? Think about the statement. This is Time magazine on top of that. Australia just exported its first batch of fuel that doesn't emit CO2. Like, who the fuck talks like that? Who thinks that way? Whose brain is so twisted that became a headline? That became the story. Doesn't emit CO2. See, CO2 is not what's heating the planet up. Let me explain it to you. It's 80 years of radioactive fallout. It's really simple, if you're actually honest. So this is a model based on Fukushima, but this model is actually only based on venting from Fukushima. This is 19 days of radioactive fallout. Gas, oil, and coal emissions, carbon, doesn't have those attributes. It doesn't cover the planet in a plume. It only goes 50 or 100 miles from the site. This stuff, man-made anthropogenic radiation, is 80 years hemorrhaging into the environment, so it never goes away. It's bioaccumulated everywhere and in everything. But it's all going to pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second, 60 times a minute, 1,440 minutes a day. It's just going to pulse energy almost at the speed of light. And energy, you can't destroy energy. It never goes away. And so that destroys the bacteria and the fungus and everything else. And that's why your forests are not breaking down. So the nuclear industry in Australia, they're disgusting is the only way to describe them. They're absolute disgusting parasites. Save and strengthen democracy, possible solutions to issues. Why was that there? Nuclear? I can't remember. NATO. Angela Merkel's dubious energy legacy haunts and divides Germany as tension over Ukraine rises. No, it doesn't haunt and divide Germany. Dubious energy legacy. Because she said no to nuclear. This is the Global Mail, who promoted uranium stocks 3 times a week, non-stop, for the last decade, and robbed all the investors by getting to invest in something that had no future, which was uranium. The Globe and Mail is the military-industrial complex, by the way. It's the biggest media in Canada. Letter revised the myth-making about Mutti Merkel. This is Financial Times. She had the biggest in Canada and one of the biggest medias in Europe. This went on since Fukushima. They attacked Angela Merkel, and when she finally stepped down, they all attacked her constantly to drive her away. Whip workers contaminated in radiation release. In 2014, they actually had a event. They pretended it was a truck fire. And the only thing burnt on the truck was the front tire on the passenger side. And they evacuated 55 football field-sized caverns for 10 days. And so when they went to go back, they couldn't go back because now they found some radiation. So it took them 2 years to dig new sections and start putting waste down again. They spent over $6 billion to fix the truck fire. No, they had a nuclear meltdown. They claimed they were only putting down, contaminated equipment and gloves and stuff like that. but almost all of it was coming from Los Alamos National Laboratories and these legacy nuclear sites. What Bikini Atoll looks like 60-year post. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Over 1 million square kilometers is too radioactive to have people living in it. 1 million square kilometers. You can't see radiation, you can't smell it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it. So talking about looks is dishonest and disingenuous. Resettlement of the population long after they got irradiated. They didn't move them out till after they were irradiated. Now they're having jelly babies, jelly lumps. Looks like was supposed to be babies. Harnessing the great nuclear reactor in the sky. Solar power, I would imagine they're referring to, but we're never going to get. We already covered the story. A review of plutonium. Oh, this was a mixed oxide fuel factory they were going to build in Savannah River. They spent $36 billion on it, and then they abandoned it. No big deal. That's what the nuclear industry does, Dana. Thank God they abandoned it. That's all I can say, by the way. But $36 billion. Oh, Dana, it's only $36 billion. Yeah. How many hospitals could you build out of that, I wonder? Why are farms, nuclear power plants, surrounded by farms? Oh, it's easier to poison you in your supermarkets, Dana. What are you, stupid or something? Which reminds me, we got a poll. Should the nuclear disease factories, known as nuclear power plants, surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve human life? 96% of the votes. We got 25 votes and 9 people in the show. You can only vote once, I'll remind you. But we got 25 votes with 9 people. No censorship going on there at all. Thyroid cancer risks lasts your entire life, so the 220 million atoms of iodine-129, that lasts your entire life too, by the way. And thyroid saturation means you're going to be producing radioactive hormones. Think about it. Same thing with insects and birds and animals. Mammals, not just humans. So should plants that are surrounded by farms be closed? Yes. Should the people that engineered the plants be sentenced to death? Yeah, of course. Should the officials sharply raise radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after Fukushima's multiple meltdowns and fuel pools, detonations and releases into the environment that raised them 75 times higher than the United Nations recommended for children? 75 times higher. Why would you do that? How do you get that evil? How does that actually work? Should those people be hunted down for crimes against humanity? Yes. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. How are you going to avoid it when your nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms as far as you can see? Is that not crimes against humanity, see? Well, the evidence clearly shows that it is. Pakistan terms India claims a nuclear proliferation dubious. They're both doing the same thing. They are proliferation machines. And they threaten each other too. They call for a massive remobilization of the nuclear industry. Well, this person obviously should be jacked and stuck in a hospital with a drip in their arms. What do you mean massive remobilization? Shut the frig up, you sack of shit. Republican presidential candidate made a firm plea for nuclear energy. This is a female, which is unusual. Well, she's promoting nuclear, so she's going to get put on a pedestal. What would happen if a nuclear bomb landed in Leeds? And who would survive? Lots of people will survive. Who will be radiated for the rest of their life? Half the planet from the radioactive fallout in increments over a decade. What would happen if a nuclear bomb exploded in Huddersfield? There's the software that lets you model the detonations in your communities. We played around with that, a bit of fun. What would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped on New York City? Well, it was. It was called Fukushima. It's the same thing, but much, much more radioactive fallout. Map shows much of Scotland would be destroyed if a nuclear bomb hit 3 major cities. This is a repository they want to build in, I think that's United Kingdom, is it? Now, that's the Swedish government. They're going to put it right under the ocean. The worst possible place imaginable. At some point, they're going to melt down, see? And the water's going to find its way in there because when it finally detonates, it'll crack the earth. There's evil and then there's nuclear. Sizewell C nuclear power station, UK's latest updates. Like the engineers that designed this and put it in a spot surrounded by farms should get the death penalty. You should get the death penalty for creating anything like that. The fuel pools are going to hemorrhage radiation all day long. Instead of powering 1 million homes, when you take the reactor core and put it in the pool, it's still splitting the same atoms for 1 million homes, but they're released into your environment, and anything close by is going to be brutal. So if you ship the food out all the time, then the radiation levels don't seem so high, right? And it's meant to poison you. It's designed specifically to protect the nuclear industry by shipping the radiation fallout away constantly because they're active, highly productive farms. It's some kind of evil, folks, that we can't ignore. It's time to address it. It's time to hold it accountable. It's time to call murderers murderers. North Korea conducts long-range missile. This is Winnipeg's son. Why are they talking about it? Because the military tells them to run the story and they'll throw a few $1,000 their way. This was a tunnel fire murder conviction. He was he was propagandized so much with North Korea. He actually thought North Korea was going to attack America, and so he dug a covert tunnel / underground bunker. And one of the people he hired to do it got killed in a cave-in, but he done it because of propaganda. A battery storage project to help replace Diablo Canyon, which won't shut down for another couple of years. So they could have built geothermal, see? It's right on the coast, so they could also use tidal energy. Well, why would you use batteries? Why wouldn't you use compressed air storage? It's on a massive hill, so you can use water batteries where you have 2 reservoirs and you pump water up to one with excess solar, wind, and other renewable energies. Don't look up. Physicists say killer comet Netflix film could be destroyed. Of course, it's going to be nuclear. Oh, no, don't believe the industry. Under any circumstances. Iran Fukushima warning Iran's nuclear plants could be wiped out, which means you'll cover the whole planet in constant, continuous plumes. So Israel can pretend that they have the moral high grounds for another little while until somebody else gets in their eyesight and they do the same thing. Nuclear disaster in Japan did something strange to trees. Well, done that throughout the northern hemisphere. Tree die-off was within a year or two very noticeable throughout the northern hemisphere. You killed the fungus and the bacteria in the forest, right? So the trees couldn't uptake nutrition anymore and water. International Energy Agency projects rosy future for renewable energy, but where's the material balance? Why are they using windmills when you can use geothermal? Well, because people will push back, right? And say, well, we don't want it. Which is what the industry wants them to say. Doesn't mean they don't have a use. Put them on the mountains where the wind blows all the time. Don't put them in your communities. Tidal energy has the potential to become viable and reliable renewable energy source. Yeah, of course it does. You can predict it thousands of years down the road. French nuclear closures send electricity prices soaring. French nuclear closures? You mean breakdowns and shutdowns? Lack of water because the glaciers are gone. Water is too hot to be used. The list goes on and on. The reactors are old and are suffering from the Wigner effect, neutron bombardments. And all the nuclear plants in France, by the way, are surrounded by farms. Nuclear Regulatory Commission foot dragging on patients' irradiation suggests regulatory capture. Oh yeah, that's a crazy story. Where people were getting 6, 7, 8, 9 sievert doses injected into their skin. Either way, they're dying, right? But there was all kinds of mistakes were made, just sloppy, with lethal doses. Using lethal doses on humans in the hospitals. There's no, I can't find any redeeming qualities for the nuclear industry. Nothing. Zero. Yeah, can't close down Medusa. That's hilarious, James. Rosatom Healthcare conducts webinar on how innovations in nuclear medicine is revolutionizing healthcare. Innovation in nuclear medicine? Revolutionizing the death of people. It's pretty, once you start looking at the nuclear industry, everything becomes quite clear. This is nothing but a genocide and an omnicide machine. This is evil beyond any concept of evil for the average person. Renewable energy sources we have are in ascendance, while nuclear is a pipe dream. Yeah, well, if you actually done geothermal first, if you're going to do renewable, the first thing you should be using is geothermal, then tidal energy if possible, then back that up with storage. Not that it's really necessary, but you only use storage for stuff like wind and solar, right? But you can back up for peak energy, so you can build a smaller geothermal, but back it up with wind and solar with energy storage. And there's lots of different storages, probably 20 different things, anything but batteries. Batteries are designed not to work, to make it spend your money and not come to fruition. Japan to implement compensation rules for losses by Fukushima rumors. So it's a rumor that the whole planet is covered in radioactive fallout, right? That's what they're trying to convince you. It's rumors that they're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland is their version of the truth, see? When the reality of it is, Japan should abandon Japan. So they're talking about the alleged dumping of water in the ocean from tanks that are actually empty. The tanks were built to make you complacent so you don't think about what happened. You only think about what they claim might happen. And their version is there's only tritium. The studies clearly show none of their assertions are true, and that they're completely dishonest. Food was banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. You can't remediate that. You can't clean that up. You can't make it go away. Editorial Taipei Times. Whoever owns Taipei Times should be executed for what they've been doing with their media. It's absolute sedition, and the ultimate end game is you murder all the children, you make everybody sick by importing food from a nuclear wasteland. Lifting the Japanese food ban is a discussion that normally you would assume would only be taken by academics, not by bought and paid for mouthpieces, big mouths known as media. A journalist is somebody to fear and scorn. By the way, Canada lifted all restrictions on Japanese food from the entire country after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures for a decade. Not just Fukushima. Canada's like, no, you can ship all the radioactive food here if nobody else will take it. Nobody else took it, and everybody in Canada got poisoned. And so that's why you only see 10 people on my show. You only see 10 people on my show because I tell you nothing but facts and documentation and show it to you. I don't really have an opinion, only stuff that's based on the facts and documentation that I can show, right? Nuclear is your enemy, and it's the enemy of all species, period. Everything with replicating cells is a victim. It's time to fight back. You're running at a precious time. You were way down the rabbit hole. Germany is closing its last nuclear plant. What a mistake. Washington Post. So what business is it of Washington Post what Germany does? None, right? But that's all the media does this constantly. And they show you a picture of a nuclear plant, and it's surrounded by farms. Which is why we got a poll tonight, by the way. Should disgusting disease factories known as nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? We got 27 votes and 9 people on the show. God bless you. Japan to help Bill Gates' high-tech nuclear reactor in Wyoming, which is 100% propaganda. It's 1,000% propaganda. Right? It's trying to make Japan look like nuclear is good. Say when nuclear is actually evil. And Japan knows it worse than anybody else. And so does Mitsubishi, a disgusting, despicable, gross Mitsubishi. Taipei Times, food important issues are crucial to ties with disgusting Japan disease factory. So, like, how is importing food and poisoning everybody in your country going to, benefit Taiwan? It's not. There's no way to benefit when you're murdering and making everybody sick. How is that a benefit? What kind of voodoo is that actually, right? Really, what kind of a voodoo is that? TEPCO is slow to respond to growing crisis at the Fukushima plant. The growing crisis. This is supposed to be the water filtration And the filters, if you filter 2.2 sieverts a liter in a filter, you can't filter it all or even close to it out. But as soon as you use the filter for 20 minutes or half an hour, you're talking thousands of sieverts when 3 sieverts is a lethal dose in this environment. But on top of that, any water that's now going through a filter of thousands of sieverts, instead of being 2 sieverts a liter, is going to be 10 sieverts a liter when it comes out the other side. Only Japan got the technology, Dana. No, it doesn't, you sack of shit. Only Japan is growing food right alongside of multiple nuclear reactors melted down and shipping it worldwide, and knows that this is genocide and omnicides machines. They have all kinds of studies showing that this is the stupidest idea imaginable. Why are all these nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? That's the subject of a poll tonight. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Duh. Health physicists in the United States worry about inhaling hot particles. Now, you don't have to worry about it. You're going to be doing it. If you eat food from a supermarket, you can't avoid it. Robots to probe. Every time I hear the word robots in Fukushima, I want to kick the shit out of some little twerp, some little nerd that builds robots for the nuclear industry. It's a complete fable. Probe? Yeah, well, maybe. To go in and get a sample, but it ain't going to repair, ain't going to fix, ain't going to mitigate anything. Yeah, and you see sheep in a nuclear plant, you're looking at United Kingdom typically. Not always the case. Where's this one from? I wonder. United Kingdom. There it is, Colombia. Surrounded by farms. What's the odds? Why do they hate us so much anyway? Shutting down nuclear option to cut emissions. Huntington B. How a local doctor ended up helping the children of Chernobyl by doing open heart surgery on them because the radiation wrecks children immensely quicker than adults. In Fukushima, 35% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. 13,646 out of 50,000, 40,000, which is equal to 358,000 out of a million. Pre-Fukushima was 1 to 2 per million. No, that's not a catastrophic event at all, Dana. What do you think is going to happen to everybody that's eating food from farms grown around nuclear power plants? Top UN radiation official claims Fukushima not expected to have any serious impact on health effects. So people like that should be charged with crimes against humanity. Anybody that says something like that should be arrested, never to see daylight again. Never. Make sure they got no window in their cells. If they get a half an hour out of their cells each day, make sure it's in a box. Teach them it's a crime, for God's sakes. Where's the integrity of the human race? Official 311 notebook concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. Well, it was much worse than that. 60 and older should be prepared to die at the power plant because it broke down. 60 and older should be prepared to die. Do you got any idea how absurd that statement actually is? Woo! Slurp, slurp. I got to keep leaning ahead. It's because I 60 and older should be prepared to die at your stupid power plant. What do you think it'll be? Their parents that are 60 and older that they're talking about, or yours? 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested of diabetes. The head of the Tokyo area medical clinic says we're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima's nuclear wasteland. But it's okay if the farms worldwide and nuclear power are surrounded by, or power plants are surrounded worldwide by farms. You really think that's not going to hurt you and your loved ones? You really think that's not why your children got sick and died? Just clear how a local doctor ended up helping the children. Back to that story. We're not doing it tonight. We're just zipping through all kinds of wonderful propaganda and news. They abandoned, like Chernobyl was so much radiation. It was irrelevant in the scope of Fukushima, but it was brutal in its own. So brutal they closed 9,400 farms in the United Kingdom because of radiation fallout from Ukraine, almost 3,000 miles away. Do you think that it only looked for farms to fall out on? Then you got the mouthpieces in Israel saying Israel has capabilities many cannot even imagine. No, they're the fourth biggest weapons producer on the planet. We have no doubt they're incredibly evil. They don't need to prove it. Are radioactive wildfires next on California's apocalyptic climate change guest list? Because your forests aggregate radioactive fallout, so when you have a forest fire, you liberate it back into the environment. Fukushima forecast large radiation cloud nearing California on April the 12th. Rain caused 130 schools in South Korea to close. Yet rain in California had 20 million times more. At the height of the Fukushima emergency, regions of California where the plumes had no monitors, despite you paid for them. You gave them the authority, you gave them the equipment, and the monetary, and they turned it all off. The watchdog, inexplicable, the EPA shut down Fukushima radiation monitoring after finding high levels of radiation in the drinking water. So they shut it off, all of them. They said they all broke down at the same time. New York Times contributor confirms California rainwater 181 times above drinking water standards for just the iodine 131. You can't just have iodine 131 fallout, folks. Discharges of Fukushima nuclear material into the Pacific effectively contaminated the entire Pacific's ocean. The melted reactor cores, which many detonated, will burn again if water is not perpetually dumped in. And TEPCO constantly, they couldn't contain it, the water emissions. They're lethal doses. You can never step over the hose again you're using, see? Biden told Putin several times nuclear war must not start. Like, Joe Biden doesn't have an opinion on it. He waits for the lobbyists to tell him what to say. His job is not to have an opinion. His job is to be the front man, to go out and sell whatever the lobbying groups tell him to sell. Bring in nuclear fusion to Cyprus, the key to sustainable energy. Right? Bring in nuclear fusion. So you get a country that thinks is real, throws all kinds of money at it, it'll never come to fruition. When all the money would have come to fruition if they used geothermal or renewables with storage, like compressed air storage. Britain under pressure to follow idiot Joe Biden's plan to honor nuclear test veterans. 7 administrations in the United Kingdom refused to acknowledge the veterans who participated in a nuclear war, known as nuclear tests, got irradiated, despite the fact the evidence was unbelievably overwhelming. It was unassailable, undeniable documentation. Britain under pressure. Britain is never under pressure. They're too big of scumbags to understand pressure. Brussels proposes green label for disgusting nuclear, and they end up voting for it and called nuclear green energy. The ultimate betrayal, isn't it? Chinese nuclear power operator launches offshore wind farm. They got the mountains in the background is where the farm should be, because the wind always blows on the mountains. There's no doldrums in the mountains, right? Canada's Trudeau botched job serves up brilliant opportunity for cowardly conservatives. David Staple, who's a cowardly monster on top of it. Denver doctor shares story of surviving Chernobyl nuclear accident 35 years ago. And classmates were forced to evacuate without their parents, which is what happens at a nuclear power plant. If you have an accident, you don't go pick up your kids. The government will take care of them. The scumbag, degenerate government will take care of them. Ecologists slam floating bomb. U.S. nuclear sub docked in Gibraltar. Ecologists. So you got to put a label on people, right? Anybody who says this is wrong, oh, you're anti-nuclear. They got to put a label on you. Like, one of the dirtiest words in the English language is journalist. It's a complete deception. There is no such thing as a journalist. A journalist is a hypnotist. They're not a human. Europe is falling into the trap of green energy policy, pro-nuclear expert says. Falling into the trap. Over 50% of Germany's energy comes from renewables. If they use geothermal, then who would have been laughing right now instead of stupid wind and solar, which is great, but for a backup only. Geothermal is the only way you should be doing anything. There's zero reasons you can't get deep enough to tap into geothermal. No matter where you do, it's there. You might have to dig deeper than somewhere else, or you might not. But it's right there under your feet every time. And if you decide you're going to, with the technology we got, we unequivocally could get to it. And once you set it up, it's good for 1,000,000 years. No more commodities. Don't need storage. And you're talking about huge temperatures. Experts weigh in on planned nuclear facility. Every time I hear the word experts, I think of a guillotine chopping somebody's head off, a.k.a. the experts. The word experts is like a slur right now, the same as the word journalist. The word journalist is a slur. A journalist is one of the most despicable creatures we have on our planet. They're actual monsters, right? Ex-UN scumbag says end goal of inter-Korean cooperation efforts should be North Korea's denuclearization. Why are you interviewing ex-UN chiefs? These are scumbags. These are degenerate scumbags, period. Not maybe, not almost. These are scumbags. Revolting ones at that. UN nuclear repository marks the 200th shipment of nuclear waste for the waste isolation pilot project. It was only supposed to be a project. And the waste is coming from Los Alamos, legacy waste, claiming lab coats and rubber gloves and tools and debris contaminated with plutonium and other radioactive elements. Believe nothing they tell you, nothing. These are perpetual liars. They literally can't open their pie holes without lying. Parents are selling children in Afghanistan shows the desperation. Well, what the military-industrial complex done to Afghanistan? They got rid of their pensions and their patents on top of it. They flattened every building in the country with depleted uranium munitions. that are only supposed to be used against hardened things like tanks. Your military is the most despicable thing ever created in human history. It's nothing but goblins now. Bunch of mass murdering, rapist goblins. Power costs in Europe soar to record high in 2021. And 2022. Japan details plans for releasing fake Fukushima water into the sea. What do you think they've been doing? Does anybody really believe that they didn't put anything into the ocean? Is there anybody actually that naive and that gullible? The oceans were covered in 2 weeks. Not just the Pacific Ocean like you see there, but the oceans, the entire planet. This model is from France based on 16 days, and we actually have the radioactive fallout studies that it was infinitely worse. These models are only based on a fraction of the releases. The tanks were built, all of them, in 2013. To hoodwink you. And the rhetoric now is sky high, right? What's the key word? A treat, treated, 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 tritium, tritium, tritium. They say tritium. These, you can't filter the radiation out of the water, period. You can't buy a filter that'll filter it out of the air, for God's sakes. Why Israel wants a state of permanent war? Because they're the fourth biggest weapons producer on the planet. That gives them a chance to test out the new weapons on humans. They're so disgusting, they defy any rationale whatsoever. Take, for example, our poll tonight. Should disgusting, despicable, revolting nuclear power plants, aka disease factories, and the majority of them are surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve the human lives? Well, of course it should be, Dana. Look at it. It's disgusting. I hear you, man. I'm with you. Study Cesium, which is just one of 1,000 fission products you got to worry about, immediately damages the heart muscles. So consuming it can give you a heart attack, folks. From the bioaccumulation can kill you in increments over time. From multiple, up to 1,800 illnesses and diseases. They got all kinds of studies shown. They know the plants are going to suck up the radiation constantly. So why would you build nuclear power plants in prime farmland almost exclusively worldwide? Because do you really think they don't know? Nuclear... don't be fooled by paid industry consultants. Low doses of ionizing radiation do cause heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome, schizophrenia, and cancer and 1,800 other illnesses. 1,600 workers, 1,600 homeless have quit. Now, there's no nuclear employees there. Nuclear employees are not going to Fukushima. IKEA, it ain't. Don't go looking for friendly nuclear options, no matter the spin. Yeah, and that's all you're going to find is spin. It's very rare to get a headline like that. Believe absolutely nothing the nuclear industry tells you. And when they tell you something, worry. Try to figure out who they're trying to murder. Because that's all they're interested in is how do we poison the rest of the humans? Can't keep up with everything, unfortunately. Kazakhstan discusses the construction of a nuclear power plant against the background of the migration of Bitcoin miners from China. Kind of lose hope, eh? Lose hope that there's any kind of a future. France halts the nuclear reactors And you can see like a farm there. When you blow the picture up, guess what? Surrounded by farms. Which is a coincidence. We happen to actually have a poll tonight. Total coincidence. Should disgusting disease factories known as nuclear power plants that are all surrounded by farms be closed to preserve the human lives? Duh. Of course they should, Dana. Yeah, here's a rare one where a politician slams the plans to increase the nuclear arsenal. There was one politician in the United Kingdom last year caught my attention. He said, it makes more sense to give everybody an ostrich than build new nuclear weapons that you can never use. And it does. It makes more sense. Ostriches are great pets. You don't have to get haircuts. They'll pull that right out of your head. India quietly launches third nuclear-powered submarine. What the hell is India doing with nuclear-powered submarines? They can't even control their own excrements and sewage. They got a long legacy of dumping it into the drinking waters. We should halt the nuclear pipe dream and focus on renewable electricity production. Wait, what? I can't believe somebody actually said that. I can't believe it actually got printed. And they're right? We should halt the new nuclear, because you don't have to halt it. It's a total pipe dream. The rules are too stringent. They don't have anything into the regulatory agencies for designs. They don't have a single reactor to quantify any of their assertions. And the idea is to stop you from having a future. Stop you coming up with solutions and pretend that they're going to do it. It's desperation from the nuclear industry. Everybody should do everything they can to kill everything in the nuclear industry. That's the moral thing to do. In a normal world, we would have already done it, right? U.S. affirms interpretation for nuclear waste allowing some removal in Idaho, Washington. Some removal. What you're seeing there is 100,000 pound containers. There are 100,000 pounds of steel and cement. And you put nuclear waste in and bury it in, and you have to bury it in the ground because even a 100-pound steel, 3/4 of or over a foot thick steel can't shield you from the gamma shines, the X-rays from the fuel rods. Think about that. And then you see people there with paper suits on. Well, all I can say is somebody has to defend the human race and 8 million species. And if it's not us, then it will be actually nobody. How nuclear can help the planet achieve net zero. Well, the best way to achieve net zero is take all pro-nuclear, and drop them into Reactor 3 at Fukushima. That would be the moral thing to do. And you can build like 1 million pro-nuclear piled up on Reactor 3s, not emitting into the environment no more. I like it. You don't have to kill them, just tie them up and throw them there. How nuclear can help the planet achieve net zero. And this was the chairman of Nuclear Waste Watch Institute. So, he shouldn't be allowed to write articles. He's a professional lawyer. He should be in jail for the rest of his life. He shouldn't be allowed to communicate with humans. The radioactive houses from Japan were sold to Hawaii, turning into radioactive homes for the homeless. Try making that up on your own. I dare you. The radioactive homes these were prisons, right? That TEPCO bought for the homeless who lost their legacy homes. And then they kicked them out after a few years and sent it and sold it to Hawaii to radiate all the homeless over there. Germany's long anti-nuclear protest ends. That's actually an amazing story. Ever since that place been open, for 35 years, they've had protesters in front of it. 35 years. Activists were protesting in front of the disease factory in Germany for 35 years. And now their vigil is finally over. And bless their hearts, man. Next time, don't use guitars. Use baseball bats. That's the only thing the industry understands. It's poison you, you should poison them. So get a job at the nuclear plant and put fission product in their drinking supply and get rid of them. Uranium, which that's a joke, folks. They done that in Canada, right? Uranium stocks, because of Sprout, they should be arrested. The disgusting Sprout Physical Trust. This was a group that took $1 billion and bought up the physical uranium to create an artificial demand and try to drive up the prices of uranium stocks. It worked. They repeated it 2 or 3 times, too, in the last 2 years. They only existed for 2 years. And they got prices up almost to $50, $48 or something. You need $60 a pound just to break even, see? But the people that bought the stocks lost their money within 6 or 7 days. Because the uranium stocks always crash within basically 4 to 7 days. And so they would have this hype in the media worldwide. The media would come out and promote the stocks. The investors who didn't know any better would buy the stocks they were recommended. And a week later, they were broke and lost their 35 years of savings after their retirement was sucked up and stole by the nuclear industry. Globe and Mail done it non-stop for 12 years now. I really think people like that, once convicted, should be skinned alive. Death by being skinned alive. And burned at a stake, preferably. Slowly. Fukushima town prepares for returns of the victims. This is Futaba, 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. This is a no-go zone, period. And they're doing everything they can to get a few people to live there so they can pretend that nuclear is not bad. Look at the idiots stood up. Look at them. It frightens me that people can be this evil. You see the 1-ton bags there? They're actually tearing them open, leveling it out and growing food in it in a no-go zone, an evacuated community that's too radioactive to live, right alongside of multiple nuclear meltdowns. The farmer travels for an hour outside to get there, take care of their crops once a week. Evil is real. It's called nuclear. Global food safety topics for 2022. It's so difficult to find any honesty in media. You got better chances of winning the lottery. It's so the censorship is pretty rough. Still only 13 viewers on the show. We've been doing for a decade. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve the human lives? We got 3 times the votes, but only 13 people on the show. We got 3 times more in votes. Almost. Back to Taipei Times. The Taipei Times is disgusting. It's hard to deny how disgusting they actually are. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. The reactors are hemorrhaging it into an environment. You don't need to eat the food. If you live within 100 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, that's what's happening to your children. Canada lifted restrictions on Japanese food imports after 93 days, while 55 countries kept the ban for a decade. So Canada was taken over by the nuclear industry in the early 70s, and now they got the country destroyed. It's actually destroyed. And the inbreeding now is guaranteed to have no future in Canada. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. 6 in 10. The head of the Tokyo Medical Clinic says we're expecting diabetes in children from the nuclear wasteland of Fukushima. Japan utility reel, some more than others. The sky-high fuel prices hit earnings. That's because of the embargoes, I believe. A sake tour of Japan. Get a taste of the nation's best monstrous radioactive sake from a nuclear wasteland. Fukushima Prefecture is home to more than 60 breweries. Death by sake. By the way, we got a poll, and I don't know if you noticed, but we actually got a poll. Should disease factories that some people call nuclear power plants, they're surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve human life? I think it's a brilliant idea, personally. Maybe I'm just pro-life, but that's me. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. What is the scariest part about this? They know exactly what they're doing. They have so many studies showing how stupid it is to grow food within 100 miles of it. Growing it right alongside of it is not an accident. European Commission wants to declare nuclear gas green, and that's what they've done. So I'm not evil, I'm pro-nuclear. No, you're evil, stupid. Nuclear is not green. What? Somebody actually said nuclear is not green? Hold the press. It's not green and it cannot be. It's not a good end goal and not a transitioning solution. They were probably arrested and burned at the stake for saying that. Which is why we should get rid of the death penalty, like injections, and burn them at the stake. You'll stop a lot of crimes right away if you think they're going to be burned alive at the stake. Everybody in the nuclear industry convicted of a crime should be burnt at the stake. Bid to dump tons of radioactive water from Fukushima into the sea, tons. They haven't stopped dumping it. It's constant. It'll never stop. On top of that, every time they have a typhoon, every time it rains there, you are washing from the entire country is radioactive. You're hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. TEPCO and JNFL to cooperate on Fukushima decommissioning. Japan's nuclear fuel limit. First off, TEPCO doesn't go to the site, and neither do the Japan's nuclear fuel limit. That's only for homeless and destitute and victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. So as we'll see again, and they actually show you the picture of a plant surrounded by farms, and there's not a single person on the planet saying, gee, you don't suppose that's a bad idea, do you? Well, guess what? It's a bad idea. That's why we got a poll tonight. Should disease factories known as nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Well, that's a start. We need revenge. We need these people pulled apart by transport trucks or something like that. Burn them at stakes and invite all the kids and get hot dogs and marshmallows and have a great time of it. It's a good thing. Nuclear is just so evil. They got no rights. They should have no rights. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. So why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? This is sickening. This is why I hate, and one of the reasons I hate the nuclear industry to do stuff like this. Smalling mascots ask Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation. Gargle to stay safe from radiation. And there's no science, right, for that argument, see? It's meant to trick the children into staying in a harmful, deadly environment. It's evil. The people that dreamt it up, it's just pure evilness. But it's evil on a whole different level, because they're targeting the most vulnerable of society, the children. Expert scumbag. Decommissioning nuclear plants are no environmental threat if closed properly. They are a constant environmental threat. There is no safe way to decommission a disease factory, you despicable, disgusting parasite. Nuclear energy bias has potential to harm New Mexico economic future. Yeah, New Mexico is... the nuclear industry really hates New Mexico for some reason. They turned them into a wasteland already. This disgusting story about the Canadian non-nuclear waste management organization, who's had $28 billion for the last 18 years. They expect it to be another 40 years before they actually have a facility to put the waste into. Almost 60 years of having $28 billion and accomplishing nothing, only dividing communities. And guess where they want to build it? They want to build it in prime farmland really close to one of the biggest aquifers in Canada. That's Finland's. Right there, you look at it. Why nuclear power is safer than ever. See, anybody who writes a sentence like that should have their fingers chopped off. If you do it again, cut their tongues out. It's just so evil. How do you call them human? How do you call someone who promotes nuclear human, see? Speaking of non-humans, Raphael Grossi, the coward of the cowards, one of the world's worst cowards in human history, Raphael Grossi. And the World Nuclear News, who never ever puts the author on their stories because they're a nuclear lobbying group. They don't want their children to read the stories and know how evil they actually are. Well, if that's not censorship, what is, I wonder? That's almost 2 hours. Almost 2 hours. We have a total of 66 people visit the site. You're not allowed to have a conversation about nuclear. Imagine how pathetic you gotta be to sit there and censor me like this. Imagine what kind of child raping, puppy raping, freak of nature you actually gotta be to sit there and censor me. Imagine what kind of freaking loser you gotta be to sit there and censor me in real time. What kind of moron gets that job? We need a morons. Oh yeah, so-and-so's are pretty stupid. Let's get them the job of censoring Dana. Can you imagine how pathetic they are? They got the job to censor me. Can you imagine? Well, it's better they're censoring me home raping their children anyway. So we got a poll tonight. Should nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? This should be considered a crime, a playground alongside of a disease factory. I've never seen low numbers as this before. The numbers yesterday and today is the lowest numbers we ever heard tell of on a show. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. That should be reassuring to anybody that ever went to a supermarket. And the fact that they have all these studies showing how dangerous it is to grow food in that environment, That doesn't worry you, do it? 100 becquerels a kilogram pre-Fukushima is nuclear waste. After Fukushima, 500 becquerels a kilogram for the first year was the safe limit. Then they changed it to 100 becquerels a kilogram a year later because they had almost 1 million extra cancers. Not that everybody has health care, and not that cancer is the only thing that's going to manifest. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans, irreversible lesions. Look up the word irreversible to the pro-nuclear community out there, you morons. Giving AI, artificial intelligence, control of nuclear weapons, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, it's pretty hard to make it worse than what nuclear done to us, isn't it? Apparently not. AI is basically the nuclear industry. They're artificial intelligences to get, and they're not smart at all. They're just evil. You don't have to be smart to work in the nuclear industry. In fact, it's discouraged. They only want evil. Field work completed in milestones for small modular reactors. Again, this is an incredible fable. This is the nuclear lobbying gooks. Energy nuclear powers its communities with more than $415,000 in grants. Yeah, they got to buy off and divide the community. That's what the industry does, right? And it costs so much cancer, they like giving money to the hospitals. Makes them, we'll give you free isotopes to treat poor Timmy. So they're so evil. There should be a million documentaries on them being convicted for crimes against humanity. Shuttle proteins safeguard the nuclear core. You should never let the nuclear industry study humans. That's a serious, fatal mistake, by the way. China starts up the first fourth-generation disease factory, high temperature, gas-cooled, pebble-based idiot machine. Well, you can count on China to be stupid. Decarbonizing shipping with nuclear power or offshore ammonia production plants. Offshore ammonia production nuclear plants. Putting nuclear power plants offshore in an age where we're having typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes hitting land at 250 miles per hour. We're coming to land at 300 miles per hour. Yeah, that's a great idea. Put the nuclear reactors out there, Dana. Totally makes sense. Hey, why don't we just surround all nuclear plants with farms and just kill them that way in increments over a few decades? At least make them all sick. Doomsday machine. That's what a nuclear power plant is, a doomsday machine. First UN nuclear ban meeting to be delayed again this summer. Yeah, they were pretty happy about that, weren't they? They all got their jollies up for that one. Nuclear engineering. If they don't go to Fukushima, then they should be burned at the stake. And Fluor Corporation, they were heavy in the Manhattan Project, right? They're the connected industry. They're scary as hell. They get contracts without asking for it. America isn't ready for Russia's battlefield nuclear weapons. Really, who actually is ready for a nuclear war? Hey, scumbag, who's ready for it? I want to hear you come up with your brilliant suggestion. You can't use them. Why build them? Because the nuclear industry don't give a shit about anything, including themselves. They couldn't care less about anything. How to teach children about climate change. This is a weather network. The very last people you want having access to your children. I guess after nuclear. UNCSC Nuclear 5 Summit still in talks, Russian Foreign Minister. The political world should be disbanded. They've proved themselves to be incapable of being rational. Short list of monsters. Europe Nuclear Decommissioning Service. Give you a head shake when it falls off. Give it a kick. You decommission jack shit. Oh, you contaminated everything. The whole problem is, you can't comment on every single story, despite the fact that that's what I'm doing. We can't get through anything if I do that. China and the U.S. must face harsh truths about each other. Instead of being countries that admire each other and work together and to have a future for the human race and species, these creatures, they call themselves pro-nuclear, do everything they can to destroy everybody's future permanently, all species. EU nations make last-ditch bid to stop green label for gas, but you can't stop it. It's these bunch of unelected people that are appointed that are going to vote for your future. And they're going to cut your throat, and that's exactly what they've done every single time. Where do you draw the line? Or do you have a line? I got a line. Newly developed artificial intelligence methods evaluate vision loss. Again, it's such a slippery road, eh? If somebody in the nuclear industry got stocks in a company, then you don't want anything to do with it. Let's put it that way. Even if they're non-voting stocks, you still don't want nothing to do with the company. It's tainted. With 7 tests in a month, North Korea calls for the world to accept its missiles. Don't worry about the world, North Korea. Just do your thing. Build your self-defense weapons. Otherwise, they're going to come there and come after you. Lioness kills the keeper. Unfortunately, it wasn't a pro-nuclear. Under investigation with Liz Hayes. Again, right? Her first show, she has a pro-nuclear scum on it. It's absurd how evil people are. Top defense official was to report good progress on French submarine project weeks before axing. You're talking about the Australian contract, right? Like, French can't even take care of their own reactors. Why haven't built subs? Why just concentrate on misery? How can you have a future when you only try to create nothing but misery? There's no money left over for the world to have a future. Everybody could have been running on geothermal decades ago. And they're not even looking at it. Launches imaging service for patients with certain cancers. Yeah. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to radiate the shit out of you to see how bad the cancer is. Yeah, it's going to cause you more cancers, but now we know how bad it's going to be. So now we can irradiate the cancers to try to help you live an extra couple of days. Search is on, but no contact imminent for new high explosive suppliers. Man, the industry is nothing but evil. They're not out there trying to do good things. They're just trying to do whatever is the most evilest. What's the most insidious way to do something? That's what the nuclear industry asks first. Okay, well, let's do that. Europe renewables are crowding out gas as coal phase out slow. Of course, Europe still hasn't tried to promote the renewables, and it's taken over. Imagine if you actually promoted it. World record 770 kilometer lightning mega flash confirmed over the United States. Its length was from London to Hamburg. So If it hits a nuclear power plant and causes a meltdown, it's an act of God, right? Because it don't take much to cause a meltdown is the sad part, right? Strengthening ties China and the GCC. The Gulf Cooperation Council members. And who knows what kind of a secret organization that's going to be. For Ukraine neighbors, defend Europe has another meaning. This was leading up to the beginning of the invasion, the planned invasion, right? The staged invasion. It's not safe to go to a supermarket. It's not safe to go to a restaurant. It's absolutely not safe to go to a restaurant in Japan. Japan's restaurants are feeding you Fukushima food. It's just bizarre how easy it is to be evil. Interest in working at CZ grew for a third consecutive year with more women attracted to the nuclear energy sector. Not attracted, the perverts wanted some women there. Kim Jong-un is ready to exploit U.S. distraction. And again, these are major medias that they do this every single week for decades and decades and decades. As part of the agenda, you got to attack North Korea at least once a week. Worldwide, every media does. You got to indoctrinate everybody to hate North Korea because North Korea has never attacked anybody in 70 years. While America and Britain hasn't stopped. America got almost 800 bases worldwide, for God's sakes. Not North Korea. Current and ex-Treasury officials, state capture nearly destroyed South Africa. Not nearly, it destroyed it. Yeah, they got another manager, another one burnt out and had to be replaced. An energy educational coordination at the Radiation Emergency Assistance Center. 37 years of military. You're going to put that in charge. No wonder you haven't got a future. Japan's not closing the door on hosting American INF missiles. No, they want it so they can steal the technology. Japan's extremely good at being exceptionally evil. Small building with a dark history on sale for 280,000 sterlings. 280,000 for an old rusty hole in the ground. Old bomb shelter. Welcome to stupid. It's called nuclear in a lot of languages, but it's actually stupid. Sundance New Frontiers on the morning you wake to the end of the world. I was had a 2-hour phone call with a certain person from the Sundance a few years ago. Called me up and tried to find out a lot of interesting questions, proper questions, real questions about Fukushima. And they fed on the answers I gave them and asked appropriate questions. It was really interesting. Continue collaboration key to tackling cancer. Not using nuclear is the key to tackling cancer. One of the big keys to tackling cancer is to disband the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's probably the biggest obstruction to a cure, is the International Atomic Energy Agency, who's trying to convince, and has successfully for decades, to use lethal radiation on wonderful souls and destroy them and their families and friends and loved ones. Speaking of scumbags, Prime Minister Trudeau, I apologize to everybody worldwide because I'm Canada, I'm Canadian, and we didn't really elect him. He was put in positions by nefarious means. I would imagine in the future he's going to be charged with crimes against humanity. U.S. humiliation, really? Yeah, right. Again, I'm not going to bother with some of these stories. This tiny concrete shed could be yours for $500,000. Again, comes with a mind-blowing secret. Whenever you hear stuff, salacious stuff like that, that's usually United Kingdom media. Calling them media is a stretch. Calling them journalists is a criminal offense, I would imagine. They're not journalists. They got to be human to be a journalist, haven't you? Power prices continue to rise as oil and gas grapples with uncertainty. This is because you're getting close to the invasion at this. What's the date on this stuff? We're still in January, I would imagine. Bear with me. Bear with me. Yeah, that's the end of the month right there. We're getting through it. It's taken us 2 days of hardcore to get through January headlines. Submarines sparring in the South China Sea. The French were sending in nuclear subs to agitate China, and did, right? And what are they going to do? They're going to nuke China? Freaking stupid French. Kim Jong-un, this is Bloomberg, blast his way onto Biden's foreign policy agenda. You're talking about a country that hasn't attacked anybody in 70 years, and you got a country that attacked everybody for 70 years criticizing them. I remember getting into an argument, a one-sided argument with a guy when I tried to have a conversation. He brought up North Korea, and I was going to say to him, give him some logic. And the fact that I was going to say, hang on a second, maybe, you should look at this other angle, he lost it. He said, I seen it on CNN. These are demons, Dana. You don't understand. And I let him go on, right? And he got more worked up to the point where I thought he was going to attack me. Because he watches CNN. CNN is the quickest way to get stupid, I've noticed with people. If a planet-killing asteroid threatens Earth, these astronomers have a plan. Yeah, it's called Yucca Mountain. That's where you're going to find them to. The idea, the concept of trusting scientists and academics is not a legitimate idea. It's a serious flaw. The last people you want to be trusting is somebody that's so-called scientist. To me, a scientist is basically a pedophile. I'd rather trust a pedophile than a scientist. Armed counter-terrorism officers will be deployed on British cross-channel ferries. Armed counter-terrorist officers. And Britain's disgusting, the government. It's disgusting. I've never read a single story that made me want to visit Britain. Particularly the British government, they're so disgusting people. They got the whole country in a constant state of panic. And everybody's a suspect. They had adverbs on television saying, is your neighbor's curtains closed all the time? Report them to this anonymous site. Really? Because my neighbor's curtains are closed? They're probably tourists. You despicable piece of shit. And the people that work there absolutely disrespect you. So the poll tonight, it's a good poll. Should nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Why wouldn't you? 11 becquerels a kilogram, children start to see heart problems. How are you going to avoid it? When all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms for hundreds of miles. Experimentally determined translocation of cesium in potatoes. So there's no way they don't understand what a horrible, horrific, to have nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. Inhaling just one hot particle can make you sick for the rest of your life. It's not just cancer, there's 1,800 other diseases. So basically, I've had people suggest that it was a coincidence that all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And I said, it's a coincidence that you think you're a human. Yeah, let's put the armed counter-terrorists on our ferries. And everybody's a suspect that gets on the ferries, right? Even your children, even the elderly. Their diaper could be full of explosives, like the shoe bomber and the diaper bomber, Dana. Hey, why don't you shut up, you sack of shit? North Korea confirms test of missile capable of striking Guam. Listen, there's no way North Korea is going to fire at anybody. They're surrounded by military bases with biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. But the media needs to demonize, needs a villain. So you're scared, too scared to ask questions, too scared to speak up, too scared to be a human, too scared. North Korea confirms tests. And so that's only meant, right, to make people scared. Ontario cities call for clean electricity. Criminals. And replace electricity from Pickering Disease Factory in Ontario. Oh, they're going to build a small modular reactor there now, Dana. Yeah, the industry is so evil, they don't even, if you say a human, they'll say, well, what's that? There's always an element of risk and choice, says the reader. This is Ontario, Bruce Power. It's Bruce Power. If it's coming from Bruce Power, you can imagine what kind of propaganda that's going to be. In the discussion regarding the proposed deep geological repository in South Bruce, where they bought up over 1,000 acres of prime farmland, farmers have stewardship of our beautiful farmlands and our rivers and streams. And every crop year, the scientists and engineers in the nuclear industry, as far as risk of radioactive pollution, in my opinion, risk is very close to zero, and our confidence should be bolstered by a 50-year history of safely handling spent nuclear fuel. You can't handle nuclear fuel because it'll kill you instantly, moron. And all the fuel is splitting atoms into the environment, you despicable lawyer. You disgusting parasite. You revolting human trash from Bruce Power. I'm not going to read the story because I'll end up getting a little tiny bit upset. I don't want that. Europe's self-made energy crisis in Canada and America, putting embargoes against Russia, who's the only one who can supply the quantity and quality of the commodities that they need, and they don't have no way of replacing it, saying, we're not taking it because we're angry at you, so we don't care if everybody in the country can't afford to buy a head of lettuce anymore or fill up their cars or anything else. It's better than giving Russia the money. Yeah, but Russia's just going to sell it to somebody else, stupid. And this was done by United Nations. The embargoes, the sanctions, which caused the massive inflation that is murdering everybody worldwide, was done by United Nations. 195 scumbags without no referendum. It's horrific. It's hard to imagine that every time United Nations gets together, that somebody don't nuke the fucking thing. Ukraine, new crisis, old themes in Washington and Moscow. Because you're getting up close to the invasion, right? So over the next few days, we'll cover that stuff, I'm sure. Washington shouldn't underestimate Israel's resolve in preventing Iran from getting the bomb. Well, because Israel can't bully him anymore then. Israel can't be a piece of shit anymore at that point, right? And then they attack Iran's nuclear sites repeatedly. They killed dozens of their nuclear scientists. And they admit it too, right? There's stupid people on the planet, and then there's Israel. There's like a whole different stupid. U.S. Department of Energy's hired as chief executive officer of Curio. Curio, I believe, is a fuel. Let me see. A nuclear innovation technology development scumbags. A second nuclear era, blah, blah, blah. Why is nuclear so evil anyway? Why can't it be reasonable? Because it's by proxy. You can't have nuclear without it being evil, see? It's always emission. There's always huge emissions in the environment. So you can't care about people and work in the industry. So they only hire people that are incredibly stupid, incredibly inbred, or just monsters, preferably monsters. Can effective deterrence exist without dialogue? What do I mean deterrence? The only reason we got this conflict is because the pro-nuclear community needs it for their stocks to go up. We'll get through what remains of this. We'll try to get back to the regular time in the next few days, probably next week. Beginning of next year, we'll get back to our 10 p.m. regular timing in my time. But right now, I'm burnt out. I've been at this for years and years and years, right? I'm burnt out. I'm not stopping. I'm just trying to get a break, but I can't take a break. We're not, the industry is out of control. I can't quantify taking a break. And so doing my shows a bit earlier, because I'm exhausted from work constantly. And this has turned out to be more work than a regular show on top of it. Bollywood, and it's okay. I can't just let 2022 go without saying, wait a second, look at all the stuff we covered in 2022. And here's a refresher course. Yeah, it takes 10 or 12 days because you're talking about a year's worth of news 5 days a week for 2 hours a day, and condense it down into half a dozen shows, say, right? Now, I'm still working on daily news cycle, gathering it up, and we got to catch up with that. And I'm doing the best I can. I'm just a human. Just don't tell anybody. Every time I see somebody in a suit now, I'm just absurd contempt. Every time I see an apologist for the nuclear industry, I have nothing but hate in my heart. Machiavellian in the Ivory Towers. Machiavellian basically was a real person, by the way. And he decided to do things the most insidious way possible. And so that's the best way to describe the nuclear industry, because that's what they do. Cool shit that exists. A fungi that can eat toxic radiation, clean up nuclear disasters like Chernobyl. Like, so people that write stories like this, and these are scumbags, right? These are scum. You're disarming the population from coming up with real solutions by putting out fabled solutions. Your parents should have to work at Reactor 3 in Japan until they drop dead. After they drown someone like you first. Nuclear Engineering International, of course, they don't put their names on the articles. They're a lobbying group. Google puts them up on the front pages, along with World Nuclear News and a few more of the scumbags. Hinkley Point C, they got a grant for the most carbon-intensive site in human history. And the industry is really good at admitting that it's a scumbag, because it can't hide it. Because that's the thing about these types of people, right? Is they're such degenerate scumbags, they don't actually know what being a good person is. They don't have anybody in their family that's actually a good person. Right? They don't have these types of qualities. They're incapable of comprehending that being good is maybe not such a bad thing to do. Nuclear med facility to lower costs for cancer treatments. Lower costs. Canada spends $900,000 on a cancer victim radiation treatment. They call it therapy, by the way, and they call it treatment. It's a murder, right? So once you spend $900,000 in radiation, there's no way the patient survives. The ones who do survive didn't have cancer in the first place, which is typically 3%. TerraPower on fast reactor development. First off, the mining site they're going to use doesn't shut down until 2025. Right? So, the propaganda is the biggest obstruction to humans having a future. And it's on purpose. They don't want you to have a future. It's pretty obvious they're doing everything they can to make sure you can't have a future and nobody else can either. Oil leaks takes strike, casting 3 reactor off the line. Disgusting EDF. U.S. Department of Energy announces cleanup progress at Savannah River site. Savannah River is the equivalent of the Idaho National Laboratories or Hanford and places like that. It's one great, big, disgusting disease factory. Believe nothing, and I mean nothing, the nuclear industry tells you, and question everything. And then you start to understand the truth. But the minute that you accept anything they say, and then they win. They're extremely good at propaganda, but they're very blatant about it. And that's the good thing about what I'm doing for the next 10 days, is that becomes really obvious. If you can manage to hang out for the next 10 shows, you're going to see a whole year's of news. And you're going to see these patterns over and over and over. It's an amazing education, right? That you can go to university for 5 years, but you still can't get this kind of education. You really can't. Because I bring you the other side of it, right? And, I'm a little upset with the industry, so a few laughs here and there, hopefully. Southwestern grad testifies at the Senate hearing on nuclear energy. She wants a job in the nuclear industry, and one of the first things she got to do is testify against nuclear. I remember her distinctly. What a sack of shit she turned out to be. All she done was told the typical industry lies. And the Senator was like, thank you so much for your courage. A nuclear museum, KRQE, which is New Mexico, they attacked me in 2014. A nuclear museum. This nuclear museum has daycare every week for children. You got any idea how evil that is? And that's the only museum I've ever heard of in history that has daycare for children. And it's even worse, military industrial complexes nuclear museum. Evil is real, folks. It's called nuclear, called pro-nuclear. Belarus nuclear instrumentation praises. Strategic nuclear-powered sub arrives in Russia's north. Strategic nuclear-powered sub. Strategic. Nothing says stupid quite like nuclear, man. My goodness. Electron beam plan to keep frozen imports COVID-free in China. This is nuclear again. Radiate the food and kill the so-called pathogens or viruses and end up harming everybody who eats the food with food that no longer has any bacteria or anything else. That's the point of eating the food in the first place. New International Degenerate Atomic Energy Agency e-learning course launched to equip young nuclear professionals, professional murderers. That's a frightening, say. The IAEA is United Nations. You call it IAEA, but it's actually just United Nations. The BN 800 on track to switch to MOX fuel this summer, which means the emissions are going to be hideous forever. And when you take the fuel out of there, like the original nuclear fuel is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. When you put it through a chain reaction again, which is what MOX fuel is, it's 2 billion times 2 billion more toxic than industrial poison. And this is extremely hot fuel. It's going to split atoms for their billions of years if you give it the opportunity. But the atoms that are splitting are lethal to everything with replicating cells, even worse than normal disease factors are. Progress on the WIP ventilation upgrade. This is a very, very expensive ventilator that was incredibly contaminated because they're not using the people that work down underground are what they consider disposable people. They're just going to reuse the same ventilation that should be changed out, but it's a lot of money. Evil is real. It's called nuclear. And this seems to be all it knows. It knows nothing but nuclear. Yeah. We got a poll. We're almost through. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by nuclear disease factories, aka nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve human lives? And that's a resounding yes, man. COVID, delayed nuclear plants. COVID was a scam, right? It was the cover story for Fukushima's disease factory over the last decade. Blowing up the moon. The U.S. wants to nuke the moon. The nuclear industry wants to nuke the moon, not the U.S. 30 years of spitting radiation into the environment. There's nothing to brag about, by the way. There is no such thing as radioactive pharmaceuticals. You're consuming radioactive poison. Here's what would happen if North Korea nuclear bomb dropped on Seoul in South Korea in World War III. World War III. Whoever wrote that story should get the shit kicked out of them and dropped in reactor 3 at Fukushima. Renewables on the rise. Coal is continuously falling. Coal is awesome. I like coal. Just don't build it in your cities, stupid. Department of Energy estimates hundreds of billions needed to finish Hanford nuclear waste cleanup. Hundreds of billions is 640 billion extra. They've spent more than that already. They want another $640 billion. And people call it carbon free. Just want to grab them by the fucking throat and punch them in the head till they shut up. Volatility rages in Ukrainian stocks as clean tech takes a beating. Bloomberg. To say I have contempt for Bloomberg is pretty underestimating the truth. New head of mass genocide machine right there. Want never again to mean something. Stop Iran's march to the bomb. No, I hope Iran gets the bomb and North Korea gets more of them. And I hate nuclear bombs. But it's the only way to have a future in that part of the world. And what you done to them, they deserve to be able to deter you. They're not going to use it. That's the point of getting it. Swedish police arrest Russian national accused of flying drone over the royal palace. Russian flew a drone over the royal palace. First off, who gives a shit about the royals? Besides idiots. Congress passes law to honor the atomic veterans with medals. Yeah, most of them are already dead. 70 years later. Only a tiny fraction of a percent is left. You pieces of shit. Disgusting nuclear. Nuclear is such disgusting people, eh? Radioactive pharmaceuticals is the best way to get killed. It's an idiot machine. Difference between Ukraine and Taiwan? I couldn't care less. Biden ready to unleash nuclear option, because they're both nuclear, by the way. Biden ready to unleash nuclear option and send Putin back to the stone. Putin. Well, like, when you're talking about the politician, you're pretending that all the women and children and the victims are not going to be affected. So the person who wrote that should have their arms broken, be thrown inside a reactor 3 at Fukushima to do the world a favor. It's time to hold them accountable. And the only way to hold them accountable is make sure they can't have children. And they shouldn't be allowed to have children. If you're pro-nuclear, you should be sterilized right away. Russia responds to U.S. proposal to de-escalate Ukraine crisis. Britain could have stopped the Ukraine war. Did you know that? Johnson could have stopped it. He's no, we're never going to cave into Russia. Let the inflation begin worldwide. Biden will discuss Iran's nuclear issues with the visiting Quator again. Terrified that Russia is going to be able to defend itself against scumbags. The future of Japan's anti-nuclear movement. And Habakusha was the Hiroshima Nagasaki victims were referred to as. But the future of the Japanese atomic nuclear movement should be the victims of the entire country, from the radioactive fallout and the constant food shipped out of the nuclear wasteland, which is hideously, unbelievably evil. Scum, just fucking scum. As climate change drives fusion energy production, again, like, whoever wrote that type of headline, I disrespect you. If you were human, I'd punch you out. Swedish government gives the go-ahead for nuclear waste hole in the ground. This is not a storage site. Digging a hole in the ground is not a storage. Running away and waiting for it to melt down. TEPCO, and we already covered this one. Funds for those impacted by nuclear weapons tests set to expire in 2022. In the United States, there's like 8 different states where they want to give every human in each state $50,000 to $150,000 because they were contaminated by nuclear bomb fallout. Westinghouse is disgusting. New nuclear waste services launched. Again, whenever you hear something like that, understand it's propaganda. Letter to the editor, time to stop spending on disease factories and nuclear weapons. Way to go, buddy. Nuclear fusion, the next big scam in nuclear. Nuclear is disgusting no matter which way you look at it. They're incapable of being responsible. EU Commissioner McGuinness defends gas, nuclear, and green investment guide, but you can't. You can come out and lie, and the media can come out and sugarcoat it, but there's still a lie. And it's an insidious one on top of that. You can't have a future by doing that either. Why UNSC joint statement on nuclear weapons is important. Nuclear war cannot be won. It must never be fought. It is already a war just by producing them, just by testing them was a nuclear war. Ukrainian used fuel storage in commissioning. You know, a couple of weeks later, Russia goes in there. Which is really interesting, some of these headlines. Maria steps in to maintain Molybdenum-99 supplies. The Maria reactor producing isotopes to make sure that no one has a future. I think they used them for the MRIs, right? Ryland's Foundation gives $200,000 towards a nuclear medicine camera. Nuclear medicine cameras. The industry has fucked everybody permanently. They're attacking you when you're most vulnerable in your hospitals. West Virginia lawmakers lift a ban on building disease factories in the states. But they're still not building a reactor there, are they? Disgusting. It didn't take long for the politicians to stab you in the face, did it? Big problems with Montana's proposal for small nuclear reactors. Well, Montana, they put a lot of nuclear silos down there so Russia would attack them as a dummy site. They made it really public, right? Well, nuclear power is safer than ever. See, anybody who writes a statement like that should have their ears pulled off the first time. Fixed array solar collector market growth and restraints. What about geothermal? Because it's their response to wind and solar is the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't always blow. But if you had geothermal, they can't denigrate you, see? And that's why it doesn't exist, because it's a win. And they only want nuclear, they don't want nothing else. So if they start having geothermal plants showing up the other industries, it's all over for them. UK Prime Minister Johnson apologizes for Partygate lapses. That person should be hung by his neck until dead for what he's got done. He lifted all restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland before he got chased out the gate. 2 years ago, he lifted all restrictions on baby food and cereal from the nuclear meltdown sites. You got any idea how fucking evil that actually is? Low carbon futures. Every time I hear that, I get infuriated. A trade pact takes effect in South Korea. I don't even want to go there. Uranium has to be part of electrification. No, it doesn't. Moron. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 20 more to go. I can go into February, but I'm not. TerraPower teams up with Japanese nuclear developers to improve sodium-cooled fast reactors. TerraPower teams up with scumbag, degenerate Japanese nuclear developers. These are scumbags. TerraPower, too. What anti-Korea racism is festering in Japan? Why? Well, Japan occupied North Korea for 50 years until 1950. Then he moved out. The United Nations went in and bombed them to make sure they could never recover, and then put 70 years of embargoes against them. The nuclear future and dread factor. So tired of propaganda. Nuclear prohibition repeal passes West Virginia legislation. The reason nuclear, you had to have a referendum, see? And this is what they're talking about. There was a referendum before you can have a new nuclear power plant. And that was done by people who went out and rallied the population of West Virginia, and it was passed in the legislation. And so, rather than having a referendum to lift it, they had a politician stab them all in the back. Okay, so that's almost the end of it. Should nuclear power plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? Duh. Of course it should, Dana. I got endless studies to show plants suck up radiation. We got endless documentation that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. We got massive documentation that the industry has done everything to slaughter you. The International Atomic Energy Agency today admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the allowable standards, radiation standards, are based on natural, not man-made. If that doesn't infuriate you, what does, I wonder? Really? If that doesn't freak you out, what actually does? That their standards are based on natural, not man-made, so they're not even standards. That's why they should be disbanded and should be publicly hung for the crimes against humanity of 70 years. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. But the IAEA standards are based on natural, not man-made. Why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms when they have tons of studies showing that's the stupidest idea imaginable? And that the child's risks are hundreds of times more than an adult. Such evil. And it's not just cancer, there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. And why does the media hate us so much? So why, how can you ever look at journalists without calling them a scumbag? How does that actually work? Because I can't do it. The one thing I can prove beyond any dispute that these are disgusting parasites. It's absolutely unequivocally unassailable. The evidence is stacked a million miles high against them. There's no evidence to support their assertions. There's endless evidence to support the facts. And we got the exact same number as last night, eh? 2 hours, 45 minutes. What the fuck, man? My back hurts, my neck hurts. I wanted to do 6 hours a day and get it over in 6 or 7 days. No, I didn't burp. I don't think I did. Hi, everybody. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy you found the time to show up. I know it's an inconvenient time for some of you. And there's 20 people on the show, which is after a decade of censorship. No big surprise. You're the most educated people on the planet, bar nobody, when it comes to nuclear and reality and what's important. You should be very, very, very proud. That's it for Dana. Let's close the poll down. Ain't no poll like our poll. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Should the disgusting, pathetic, sacks of shit nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human lives? Oh, hell yeah, Dana. Of course. We really, really, really appreciate everybody that participated in the poll. Thank you so much. It might not seem like a lot, but it is. Thank you for Dana and Asana for moderating, and everybody for commenting and participating. And to those who watch this and those who are watching later, hugs for all of you. And my admirations for everybody that's trying to understand the truth. I know that I got a bit of an anger issue the last 2 days. That's probably not going to go away for at least another 10 days. Because this makes me angry. And I get most of it off my chest before I go live. But when I'm reading the headlines, it sneaks back in. Because I care. And I know that's a crime. And in the future, it'll probably be illegal, by the way. It's certainly illegal now. By censorship. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Or tomorrow afternoon, or whatever time it shows up. Who knows? Right now, this is kind of working for me. It's not the I'll be back on a normal schedule next week. But I'm way off my schedule. And I'm trying to do something that's almost impossible. And when you consider how many stories we ran through yesterday and today, you can appreciate it, obviously, right? It's a lot, man. I can't comment on every single story, even though I'm trying. It's hard not to, but it takes forever to tell the story. And so it looks like we can cover this in a month or something like that. I don't know. We're going to have to spend more time on each show, or we're going to have to not comment as much. And I don't think that's acceptable. Well, we'll let it go as long as we can. We'll do the best we can. And I don't expect people to find me, because YouTube makes sure I don't get sent out to very many people. And I remind anybody new, there's links in the bottom of the description you can donate to. And if not you, then who will donate? And remember, the industry has endless amount of money to work with. We have very little, and we have a lot of expenses. Stephen Young donated $50 on Christmas Eve, I think it was. Thank you, Stephen Young. I hope you're doing well out there. I know this is an odd time for Stephen to catch the shows. We'll see everybody tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, sometime tomorrow. If not, the show will be here when you get around to it. And the passion that I have for this planet will never wane. I understand that now. And I truly believe that that's why we're here. We're here to bring some sanity to the conversation. And it's a big conversation from a lot of different actors. And that's what the industry is, actors. Very, very harmful actors. Good night, everybody. Take care, folks. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody soon enough. And don't forget, if you made it this far, give us a thumbs up. Have a great night, great day tomorrow.